Kakalosh Boker Or, Masechet Sanhedrin Daf Yomi Daf Lamed Vav Amud Aleph 36a1. We were talking about right now when Yom Tov is going to be pushed off for a Korban Yachid. So therefore, we went and we said like this. We said we were speaking about what pushes off what. So Amar Rava comes and he says this is the bottom of the Hamud Bet where it said Lo Retzicha Docha Korban Yachid. Retzicha meaning killing. Right here, we're not talking about murder. We're talking about Retzicha meaning the concept of killing somebody that they were Chayav Mito Bedin. So Lo Retzicha Docha Korban Yachid Mikal Vachomer from a Kal Vachomer. Why? My Yom Tov is not going to be pushed off with a Korban Yachid. He says, which means like this. We know that there's no Isur bringing a Korban Yachid, right, of on Yom Tov. There's actually going to be a machloket. We're going to speak about it right now. So he says, En Retzicha, and now still you're not allowed to kill Mitat Bedin, right? So therefore he comes and he says, En Retzicha Docheoto. So it's not going to come and push it off. So if a Korban Yachid, which is more Chamur, Shu Doched, which is going to come and push off, right? When we're talking about now that it's going to be a korban yachid, which is going to be pushed off Yom Tov, eno din shelo teretzicha docheoto. So obviously, then retzicha should you have the same thing, which means what we're trying to make is we're trying to make a kal vachomer, right? And this is what we're trying to do over here, right? If you're going to come and you're going to make this kal vachomer, so just say that a korban tzibur is going to be pushing off a mitat betin. So therefore, obviously, you can't say that it's going to be on a korban yachid. So therefore, the same halacha applies to korban yachid. Remember that we're talking about retzicha. We're talking about that if a person right now killed, we do not kill them. If they already went up to do a service in the Bet HaMikdash, so therefore we said that me'im mizbechi v'lo me'al mizbechi. If they already started the service in the Bet HaMikdash, we don't take them out from the mizbeach and we don't kill them. That's from me'al mizbechi. You do not take them off. From me'im mizbechi, you do. But what happens right now is there going to be a difference between korban tzibur and korban yachid. Obviously, right, there's going to be a difference between a korban tzibur. On Shabbat, you only bring korban tziburs. You do not bring any korban yachids. But on Yom Tov, you're allowed to bring a korban yachid. So says the Gemara, Hani chalamandamar. That's only good according to the mandamar en nedarim devo keravo Yom Tov. That you're not allowed to bring a neder or nedava on Yom Tov, which means that I cannot just bring stam a korban neder or nedava on Yom Tov. Right? We know, by the way, this has to nafkamina, not only just to do with korbanot, it's to do with tefillot. We know that a person, right? They right now nowadays our tefillot are instead of korbanot. So imagine right now I want to pray a tefillat nedavan yom tov. So now if you hold that you're not allowed to bring a korban neder or nedavan yom tov, so for the same halacha applies to a tefillah. I cannot just make a stam tefillah, and there's a lot of nafkaminas in that to do with the concept that all of a sudden I just want to do tefillah nedava. You can't do tefillah nedava, right? It's Shabbat or Yom Tov. Shabbat Yom Tov you don't bring tefillah nedava. But according to the mandam and the darim devo kervim Yom Tov, that you are allowed to bring them on Yom Tov. So, Michael, I mean, what are you going to say then? At the end of the day, according to the shita, right? That's what we're just saying. Just like Abaye was doresh kal vachomer, right? You can't say the kal vachomer that we just said, and to start bringing that killing is not tocheh korban tzibur or korban yachid, right? So he says you can't say that anymore. Ela marava, but rather Rava comes and he says lo mi baya. We're not only talking about right the leman da'amar and darim devo kervim Yom Tov. Te'alo mitkayem mi mizbechi klal. Because over there we're on Lamed Vav Amud Aleph. Yeah, but he says because we're not going to be mitkayem bichlal meim mizbechi. Because according to him, you could actually say that the kal vachomer is that a tzicha is not going to push off, right? Not going to push off even a korban yachid. So therefore, when it says meim mizbechi, it's teaching you that if a kohen comes to do a service in the Bet HaMikdash, we come and we actually kill him. So therefore, we know that the pasuk is teaching us that we can't say this kal vachomer. Ela filu l'mandama, but even according to the mandam and the darim devot and kervim yom tov, that you're not going to bring them on yom tov, right? Active, it's written mi mizbechi hamyuchadli. It has to be something which is miyuchad for me. Umayninu, what is that? Korban tamid. Meaning, even if you're going to tell me that be'emet it is written, which means you're going to take him from the mizbeach in order to kill him. Why? Because he's chayav mitat bedin. So don't think that the kohen could run to the mizbeach, start doing a service, and then that's it. He says no. It's not going to help, even if you're going to tell me that you could bring a korban neder and nedav and all those things. You know why? When it says mi mizbechi means something which is miuchad for the mizbeach. What is miuchad? We're not going to stand that all of a sudden he's bringing a neder and nedav. It has to be something, for example, like a korban tamid, right? But V'amar Nachman and the Torah says mi mizbechi techenu lamut. So therefore, it comes out that the pasuk is teaching you that retzicha is doche, even a korban tzibur, right? Why? Because here it's mi mizbechi, which mizbechi, not of a neder and nedav. A korban tamid. Korban tamid is a korban tzibur. And still, when it says mimi is lamut, what does it mean? that you're going to come and you're going to take him from the Mizbeach to kill him. So it comes out that a tzicha is doche, even a korban tzibur. Right? Fine. Now we're going to go back, right, to the original concept that we spoke about, which is Dinei Mamonot. So anyway, we came back and we said, right, about the concept of the Kal Vachomer and everything. So obviously we do not kill on Shabbat or Yom Tov. We do not do it, even though you are allowed to come and bring, right, Korbanot Tzibur on Shabbat, right, and Yom Tov, but you're not allowed to kill, meaning it's not going to push off, right, because of Mita, as they say. Okay? Fine. Dinei Mamonot. When we're talking about now, Dinei Mamonot. Yeah, here are the Gemarot if you want. Oh, okay, very good. So he says like this: Dine mamonot, tumot v'tarot. So when we were talking about right now the concept of dine mamonot, and we're talking about tumot v'tarot. Okay, so he comes and he says like this: Amar Rav. Rav says. So we're talking about where they want to come and they want to start giving the psak. So whenever we're talking about dine mamonot, right? He comes and he says, right? Matchilim et minyana deot from the gadol shebedayanim. Why? Because of the kavod. So Amar Rav. Rav comes and he says, Ana havai b'minyana dever Rabbi. I was there with the minyan of the Dayanim, right, in the Bedin of Rabbi. Uminai didi amu matchila beresha. And they started with me. Right? And they started with me. So obviously, he's coming and saying that they started with me and they didn't start with anybody else. So says the Gemara, but how could it be? Va'ana matchila min gadol tran. We learned, right, that with everything except for dinin and fashot, right, you're always going to come and you're always going to start shibla gadol. So therefore, if Rav loya gadol shebdayanim of Bedin of Rebbe, so therefore, why all of a sudden do they want him to come, right, and to do it first? Why? So he says, Amar Rabba bered Rabba. So it says Rabba, the son of Rabba, right, and he says like this, and he says, V'iteiman. Some people say Rabbi Hillel bered Rabbi Vales. Shane minyan of Rebbe. It's different minyan of Rebbe. Techulu minyana minatzad v'matchili, because there they always started minatzad. Meaning there wasn't a difference. We said beforehand that there's going to be a difference between the nefashot, the mamonot. Do we start from the gadol? Do we start from the katan? Obviously, there's a svara not to start from the gadol, because many times once you start from the gadol, that's it. Because if the gadol said that, I'm not going to argue on the gadol. So for everyone just follows suit, right? So therefore, yeah. So he says. So therefore, obviously, that's what we're talking about over here. Okay. So now he comes and he says, right, like this. Ve'amar Rabba bere de Rava. Says Rabba bere de Rava. V'itema Rabbi Hillel. And some people say Rabbi Hillel bered Rabbi Vales. Mimot Moshe ve'ad Rabbi, from the days of Moshe until Rabbi, lo matzinu Torah ugdula b'makom echad. We never found Torah and Gdula in one place. From the days of, that's what he's saying, from Moshe Rabbeinu, right, until Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yudah Nasi. So says the Gemara, velo. What? There was no Gdula other than. He says, Harav Yeshua. You have Yoshua bin Nun. He was also Torah and Gdula. So he says, answers the Gemara, Have Elazar. He says, yeah, but at the same time, you had Elazar. So therefore, it's not considered Torah b'makom echad. Why? Because since Elazar Kohen, right, was Shavet to Yoshua, right? So therefore, you had like two on the same level. It wasn't the same like Moshe Rabbeinu or like Rabbeinu HaKadosh. So as the Gemara, Vava Pinchas, he says, one second, you also had Pinchas, right? Pinchas was also Torah Gdula after the death of Yoshua and Elazar. So they answered, yeah, you have the Zekenim. Meaning even after the death of Yoshua, right, and you had Pinchas, and Pinchas Kilu was the Gadol Ador, still you had the Zekenim. B'makom echad, the kavanah that everything, the Torah and the Gdula was only in one place. That means it was dam echad. There was one place that he was also the Gadol Ador, right, and also Gadol mitzad the Misra, mitzad the power, and mitzad Gdula of the Torah. So therefore, that only happened by Moshe Rabbeinu and then Rabbi Yudah Nasi. Because during the time of Yoshua, you had also other Gdolim, right? During the time of Pinchas, you had the Zekenim, and that's what we're saying. So he says, V'ava Shaul, you had Shaul HaMelech. He said, Hava Shmuel, you had Shmuel HaNavi. So again, since Shmuel HaNavi was actually Gadol B'Torah more than Shaul, so you had the Gdula, but you didn't have the Torah. You have each one. So he says, Vanach Nafshe. He says, what are you talking about? But he passed away. So he says, okay, Kulu Shane Kamninan. We're talking about his entire life, right? We're not talking about just for a few years, right? Or very little years, right? So says the Gemara, Vavi David. You had David HaMelech. He says, right? He says, Hava Ida HaYairi. You had Ida HaYairi, which was actually greater than David HaMelech in Torah. This is a Gemara Masechet Moed Katan. Yeah, so he says, Vanach Nafshe. Yeah, but again, Ida died during the lifetime of David HaMelech. So he says the same answers we answered before. Kulu Shane Kamninan. We're talking about the entire lifetime. Right? So ask the Gemara, Va'ave Shlomo. You had Shlomo Melech. Right? So he answers Shimi ben Gera. Remember, who was the Rabbi of Shlomo Melech? Shimi ben Gera. Right? He was also Gadol B'Torah. So he says, what are you talking about? Vakatle, he killed him. Right? So what's going on exactly? right? So this is the concept, because he went and he had to, because of his father, so he had to come and he had to make a decree. He wasn't able to leave Yerushalayim, and then afterwards he went and he killed him, right? So he killed him. So again, the Gemara answers the same answers we answered before. Kulu shene kabinin. We're talking about the entire lifetime. So ask the Gemara, Hava Chizkiah, Yad Chizkiah Melech, right? So answers the Gemara, Hava Shevna. You had Shevna. Shevna was Gadol Mimenu Torah, even greater than Chizkiah Melech. So he says, yeah, but Vaiktil, he was killed. Remember that Shevna was killed during the lifetime of, right, Chizkiah Melech. This was when Sancheriv came, right? So they were speaking about the death of Shevna, right, through Sancheriv. So answers the Gemara, the same answer we answered before, Kulu Shane Kamnin. And again, we're talking about all the lifetime, right? So ask the Gemara, V'ha Ezra, right? He says, 1 second, you had Ezra, right? What does that mean? You have Ezra Sofer. So he says, again, you had Nehemiah Mechachliyah. Okay, so says the Gemara now. Now that we said all these things. Amar Ravada Barava says Ravada Barava. Afani Omer Mimot Rebbe Ad Ravashi Lo Matzinu Torah Gdula B'Mkom Echad. Meaning, we just proved to you anacha. The anacha was that from Moshe Rabbeinu, right? That you had Torah Gdula B'Mkom Echad, right? There was nobody like him other than Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, again, you always had the Gdolei Ador, but there were other Gdolim with them. There was nobody like what happened by Moshe Rabbeinu, and like what happened by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi Rabbeinu HaKadosh. Now the Gemara says, Ravada Barava, the same halacha applies to Rabbeinu HaKadosh until Ravashi, right? So he says, Lo matzinu Torah Gdula b'makom echad. So says the Gemara, Velo, what? There was no one that was a gadol like Ravashi b'doro. Fa'ava Huna bar Natan. You had Huna bar Natan. Says no. Huna bar Natan mechafa v'kaif le Ravashi. Huna bar Katan was actually smaller than Ravashi. It means he humbled himself in front of Ravashi. So therefore Ravashi was actually greater than him, also in the Torah and also in Hanaga. So therefore that's why we said it's Torah ugdula b'makom echad. You had both the Torah and the leadership. You had both together. Okay? Nikuda. So that's how he comes out. Moshe, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Ravashi. It actually makes sense because Moshe was Torah Shebichtav. Torah Shebal Peh obviously came from him as well, but right, that's Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was the Mishnayot, and Ravina Ravashi, right, that was the Gemara. So it actually makes sense, right, that we have the 3 pillars, right, that they were Torah Ugdula in all 3. Ma? Talmud Bavli was in Bavel. Ken. And Yerushalayim. Yeah. Fine. Says the 2 dots. Okay. Dinei nefashot. Dinei nefashot matchilim min hatzad. You remember we spoke about and we said that dinei nefashot we're always going to start from hatzad, not from the gadol. Because if you're going to start from the gadol, let's say he's going to be mechayev. That's it. And everyone's going to be afraid. So they're all going to say the same thing. So therefore, we always start from the side, right? And then the last, one of the last ones will be the gadol. So says the Gemara, how do we know that by dinei nefashot we're going to start from the tzad? Amar Ravacha bar Papa says Ravacha bar Papa. Amarkat says the pasuk lo ta'aneh al riv. What does it mean lo ta'aneh al riv? You have to say lo ta'aneh al rav, meaning don't argue on the gadol shebadayanim, which is the rav. So therefore, it comes out, don't ask him first, because if you're going to ask him first, and maybe he's going to say chayav, and then you can't argue on him. So for as long as he didn't say anything and he didn't voice his opinion, I could say whatever I want. So therefore, lo ta'aneh al riv means don't answer al, don't read it riv, read it rav. So lo ta'aneh al rav. Meaning, let me first hear everybody else out. And once I hear everybody else out, now I'm going to hear the rabbi. Rabbi Bar Chana Amar. Rabbi Bar Chana comes and he says, right, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Me'acha. There's another pasuk. Vayomer David la'nashav chigru ish charbo v'yachkiru ish et charbo v'yachkor gam David charbo. It says that they come and he tells them, right, to all put on their swords, right, to come and to yield their swords. So what happened? He comes and he says the kavanah of Betin and of David over there, right, that he wanted to kill Navala Karmali, right? He comes and he says the kavanah was that David and his Betin, right, was coming and saying he's Moreh b'malchut. Since he's Moreh b'malchut, we have to kill him. So what happened? First they heard everybody else. David was the last one to give his psak. And that's why it says, Vayachkor gam David et charbo. He was the last one. So from there you have a proof that first you start with everybody else, and then you're going to start with the gadol, right? Shebekulam, and that's why they paskin that he's going to be chayav mita. So Amar Rav comes and he says, right? Shoneh adam letalmido v'danimo b'dinei nefashot. Do you know that a person could actually come and teach his student halakha to do with dinei nefashot, right? Which is right there in front of them, and then afterwards he could actually count the talmid with the rav in the same bedin, and they're still considered 2 dayanim to do with deot. By the way, you should know that even until today, we have this machloket. So for example, let's say you have Many times this happens with the I forgot now who it was, but there's the Rosh, for example, and the Tur. The Tur was a son, right? Is he considered, or Rabbeinu Yerucham and the Rosh, right? Or many times you have, are they considered two different shitot or one shita? Because it's the rabbi and the student. So now, if you're going to tell me that they're arguing, then for sure you could say it's very simple to say it's two different shitot. But let's say they go in the same shita. So you're going to tell me what? It's two different sheets. It's like two in numbers. If we're playing a numbers game, saying obviously the rabbi and the student, right? Obviously, what do you want from them? So again, the same concept here, right? What we're trying to say is that here a person could teach a student, and then what's going to happen is he's counted as a dayan, right? And then he's going to be counted as two different dayanim, right? The rabbi and the student. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So he says exactly. So, huh? Because no, because if obviously you're always going to think like your rabbi, so maybe it's not considered two different shitot. It's all the same shita. It's like the same style of learning, right? That's the concept. So he says meitvei. So we're going to ask a question on this. Hatarot v'atumot ha'avu b'no harav v'talmido minim shnayim. Right? He says over here. 1 second. To do with the father or son, right? The rabbi and a student, right? They do count it as two different people. But to do a dinei mamonot, dinei nefashot, dinei makot, right? Or kiddush hachodesh, right? V'ibur hashana. He says, depends what it is. He says, if it's going to be stam, right? For example, tuma v'tara. So therefore, yes, tuma v'tara, count them as two. But anything to do with dinei mamonot or dinei nefashot, or to do with kiddush hachodesh, ibur hashana, all that, right? 1 second. He comes and he says, all these things, it's only going to be what? Only going to be one. So therefore, it's the exact opposite of what we just said now. Right here, we're saying that it's only one person. It's not considered two people. So answers the Gemara Lamedvav Mubet 36b. Ki Kamar Rav. When did Rav say this? He comes and he says, Kigon Rav Kahana v'Ravasi. We're talking about Rav Kahana and Ravasi. The ligmene davu, right? Ravasi, the ligmene davu, the Rav havu tzriche, but that they still needed, right, the Talmud of Rav, which means the Yediah of the Torah of the Masoret of the Rabbo. Meaning they still needed Rav, but they didn't need the Svarot of Rav. Meaning they knew how themselves to come and start being done in Svarot. Right? However, though, right, he still needed Rav. So therefore, this Talmid is considered, right? That's what we were saying over here. He's considered a Bal De'at Tzma'it in himself. Why? Because since he could give his own logic, so even though he still needs his rabbi to teach him other things because of Masoret, traditions, and things like that, but since he has his own De'ah, his own mindset to do with how to give over a psak, so therefore he's allowed to do that. So Amar Rabbi Avu says Rabbi Avu, there's 10 differences between dinei nefashot and dinei mamonot. Vekulan, and all the differences that we just said now, are not going to be Shor Niskal, meaning the only thing, right? The only thing that you need by Shor Niskal, remember we're talking about a Shor that you have to kill it, right? You have to kill it because it killed a human being. So therefore the Shor Niskal, the only thing that you need is 23, a Bedin of 23. Because if you remember, we made a Hekesh between, right, Adam and Behema, that just like an Adam, you need 23 to kill an Adam, so too by Behema, you need 23 to kill a Behema. However, though, to do with all the other halachot, to do with dinei nefashot, that you don't need by Shor Niskal. You need it by a human being, yes. Right? There's going to be 10, but not by the Shor Niskal. Menana mile, how do we know these words? Amar Ravacha bar Papa says, Ravacha bar Papa, the pasuk says, Lo tatem mishpat v'yonecha b'libo. What does that mean? We do not want you to change, right, and to incline the mishpat, right, when you're going to have a dinei nefashot. So what does that mean? Mishpat v'yonecha iatamate. You do not want, and that's what we're saying, we're not going to be machriya the din lechova al pi rov of dayan echad, right? He comes and he says, right, but over here, right, we're talking about, right, okay, obviously it's not only an evyon, it's also dashir, but he comes and he says that by shor niskal it's completely different, right, and therefore that's why we said to do with halacha ematin lechova, right, of one rov, shor niskal is not like that. Right? Why? Because it's not like a regular dinei nefashot. Meaning, let's say I have of the 23, I've got 12 against 11, and 12 say to kill, and 11 says not to kill. Right? You remember we have one lechova. So to do with shor niskal, you could kill. Yeah. For sure not. That's what we just said. That's what exactly we're saying. That's what we're saying. That's exactly what we're saying. By an adam, you need always minimum shtaim lechova, one lezechut. By Shor Niskal, even one lechova. Why the lachot by Shor Niskal is completely different than a human being, right? Why? The Shor Niskal, all you need is 23. 23. That's it, the number 23. None of the other halachot. All the other halachot doesn't matter. So therefore, well, that's what we just learned. Yeah. Says the Gemara, Asara. He says, 1 second, there's only 10 differences? Hatishavu. There's 9 differences. Why do you say there's 10 differences? Says the Gemara, Ha'asara ktani. He comes and he says, right, really by met, there is 10 differences. So why are you saying only 9? He says, Mishum, de'ena kol ksherin, right, be'esrim v'shlosha chadahi. What does that mean? When we're coming and we're saying that there's only going to be 9 differences, right? And the din is that not everybody's kosher to dan dinin nefashot, right? So that's going to include, for example, a mamzer. A mamzer cannot dan dinin nefashot, right? So he says be'isrim v'shlosha chadahi, which that's only one hevdel. Right, he says that since you need 23 dayanim, which is a sanedre ktana, right, and therefore a mamzer cannot judge because a mamzer is going to be nitma'et from being a dayan in Sanhedrin, just like we learn in the psukim. So it comes out. So why do we say that there's going to be 10 hevdelim? Really, be'emet, so there should only be 9, but it's the same halacha. So why are you telling me then that there's the dinin nefashot, dinin mamunot, the difference is going to be 10? There's only going to be 9. So you went and you told me, right, of the concept that you can't be a mamzer. He says, "Ena kol ksherin ladun dinin nefashot." He says that's the same thing as the it's all the same, right? The Sanhedrin Ktana you can't have, right, a mamzer. So answers the Gemara, Haika Charite. There's another halacha also. You know what that halacha is? The Tana we learned in a Braita. En moshivim Sanhedrin zaken v'saris. You're not going to put an elderly person that's sterile, that would never had children, right? Umi shelo banim, or somebody that never had children. Why? Because since they never had tzar gidul banim, they're never going to have a real rachamanut. They never had children, so therefore they don't know what it means. So they don't have mercy. You're going to come, right? You're going to come and you're going to tell me that you mercy, right? It's impossible. Rabbi Yehuda Mosif, Rabbi Yehuda comes and he says, Af achzari, even an achzari also, right? What does that mean? A person that's known to be cruel, you'll never put him there also. That means even though he had, right, he had tzar gidul banim and everything else, you won't have it. But the opposite you do for a mesit. For a mesit, you could put an achzari, you could put a zaken saris, you could do whatever you want. Why? The Rahman Amar, but the Torah said, right? We don't want to come and we do not want to have mercy, right, on the person whatsoever. Okay, that's what we said until now. So we're continuing with the Gemara, where the Gemara says, "Akol ksherin ladun dinei mamonot." We're in the 2 dots where we just said that everybody is going to be kosher for judging dinei mamonot. What does it mean now exactly? Akol latu yemai. What does it mean now that we're going to come and we're going to include hakol latu yemai? So Amar Rav Yehuda comes and he says latu mamzer, meaning a mamzer is allowed to judge dinei mamonot. He's not allowed to judge dinei nefashot, but he can judge dinei mamonot. So says the Gemara, well, we already learned this once. He says, whoever could do dinen nefashot for sure could do dinen mamonot. But if you could do dinen mamonot, it doesn't mean you could do dinen nefashot. It's 2 different halachot. So we asked over there, right? We asked in the Mishnah, what is it coming to include? It comes to include a mamzer. So you see that even though he's not kasher ladun dinen nefashot, but he is going to be kasher to dan dine mamonot. So he says, you're right. Chada latuye ger, v'chada latuye mamzer. He comes and he says this. One of them is to include a ger, and one of them is to include a mamzer, right? Uvetzricha, and we need, right, both of them. What does that mean? Diashmin and ger, if we would only tell you that your ger is allowed to come and dan dine mamonot, at the end of the day, a ger could get married to anybody in the kal. So therefore, just like a ger could get married into a kal, meaning a isha Israelit, so he could dan dine mamonot. Aval mamzer cannot get married to anybody. So therefore, Elmaleh, I would say that it's not included. V'yashmin and mamzer, and if it was only teaching us about a mamzer, he says the ba mitipak shera. Remember, a mamzer at the end of the day is still Jewish. He comes from a tipak shera. He says of a ger de lo ba mitipak shera, but a ger that does not come from tipak shera. Elmaleh, I would say that you cannot judge dinei mamonot. Tzricha. So that's why you need both. So it comes out halacha l'maaseh. You could have a ger and a mamzer that could judge dinei mamonot, but they could not judge dinei nefashot. Now says the Gemara, not everybody is kosher to be done dinei nefashot. My Tama, what's the reasoning? The Tana of Yosef, just like he says over here, they have to be the dayanim which are in the bedin. They have to be people which is of tzedek. Kach menukim mikol mum. So too they have to be cleansed of all types of psulim as well, of deficiencies. right? That we're going to be any type of a psul. So Amara Meimad. So Meimad comes and he says, Micah, what's the pasuk? Kulach yafa ra'yati umum en bach. This is the pasuk that's teaching us everything is going to be good, right? Ra'yati mum, you don't have a mum. So says the Gemara, the dilma mum mamash. Maybe we're talking about mamash, a real mum. We're talking about a real blemish. So a guy can have a broken arm. A guy can have, I don't know what, thing of the eye. Maybe it's talking about a real mum. So Amar Vacha bar Yaakov, the pasuk says, "V'yityatzvu sham imach bedomin lach." When it says that by Moshe Rabbeinu, right, that he comes and he put a Sanhedrin Gdolah, that the Shivim Zekinim have to be with you, right? V'yityatzvu sham imach, they have to stand with you. So he comes and he says, imach means that they have to be domet to you. Domet to you means they have to be muchasim. They have to have a certain type of genealogy, a lineage. They can't just be people that are from the street that you come and you bring them. No. It has to be mamash, right? Muchasim. So says the Gemara, "V'din mahata mishum shchina." One second. Maybe over there the Sanhedrin was special. There it was because of the shchina. So therefore, there you're right. There had to be, a certain hierarchy. It's not just any type of oligarchs or whatever it is. So he says, no. Elam Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. The pasuk says, "V'naseu itach." When it says over there that Moshe Rabbeinu was told by HaKadosh Baruch Hu that they're going to carry the burden with you. So when it says, "V'naseu itach bedomin lach leve," you're right. It has to be domin to you. And therefore, again, there's going to be different psukim, but basically what we're trying to bring down is that lemaskana, that any people of the Betin, they have to be cleansed of any types of blemishes. And what are the blemishes? We're not talking about physical blemishes. We're talking about of genealogy. Okay, we're going to finish with the Mishnah. The Mishnah comes and it says as follows. Sanhedrin. When we're talking about the Sanhedrin of 71 Dayanim, right? Or of the 23 Dayanim. It was always going to be like a chetzi igul. So the way that it was always going to be like a moon, right? Which is going exactly. So he says over here, in order that they should see each other. Okay? So you have two sofre dayanim in front of them. One on the right and one on the left. So these to right, the mechayvin and the mezakin. Rabbi Yudah comes and he says, no, there are three sofre dayanim. Why? Echad kotev divrei mezakin. One of them, the divrei mezakin. Echad kotev divrei mechayvin. One of them is going to be right, the divrei mechayvin. Ashlishi kotev divrei mezakin. He writes both of them. Right? He writes both in order that you're always going to have two edim. You remember that you're always going to have two witnesses. Because the one in the middle, he could always join the one of the mezakin, or he could always join the one of the mechayvin. Right? Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph from the top. V'shalosh shurot shel Talmidei Chachamim yushu lifnehem. Now you had 3 rows of Talmidei Chachamim which are going to be sitting in front of the Dayanim of Sanhedrin Ketana. Okay, so you have 23, right? That's what he says here. Talmidim in every single shura, right? In order that if they needed to add on to the Dayanim, you could add on. All the Talmidim know, right, their place. Because since he used to go according to Chokhmah, so therefore, obviously, every single one knew where his seat was, right? It wasn't that just stama shiur that you just come in. Everyone had a certain, because remember, the ones from those rows would go and replace the dayanim. So obviously, they had to take the greatest of all of those students. So therefore, there was always an order in order that you knew of the chokhmah, and whenever one would go, so then they used to move up, right? Because that's each one was getting promoted, right? But again, it was always in a certain order. Right? So now if they have to come and they have to add a dayan, so they used to bring from the first one of the Talmidim, he was the greatest of all the Talmidim. Right? So now one of the second row came to the first row. Came to the second row. And then they used to come and take another one and bring him to the third row. Right? He wouldn't come and do Ela Yoshe b'mkom ha'ra'ui, according to his chokhmah. Meaning he was always going in that fashion. So therefore it was always like the rows, and therefore you knew he's the next dayan in line. Then the next one, and then when you finish the first row, go to the second row. So the second that you put one from the first row, somebody else is going to come and they're going to make up for the first row. That's the way that it was done with the